On this Wednesday night, the repercussions from that horrific explosion at a Gaza hospital. Hundreds are dead. Both sides are blaming each other.
This is a war crime.
It appears the result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza.
What a war crimes expert is saying about who could be responsible and the goal to stop the spread of false claims. The U.S. president on the ground in Israel.
Will not let you ever be alone.
The rising tensions testing the limits of Biden's personal diplomacy.
Shame on you. This needs to stop right now.
And still trapped in Gaza.
Trust me, to die, it's nothing. To live in fear, it's the worst.
The Canadians more desperate than ever to come home.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. The carnage at that hospital in Gaza means any hope of calm in the Middle East is now much harder to see. Joe Biden, the first U.S. president to visit Israel in a time of war, cut short that planned visit to the region. Meetings he'd planned with Arab leaders collapsed. The horror of what happened at this Gaza hospital, hit with a massive explosion, marks a seismic shift in what was already a tense moment in the region. The Gaza Health Authority says 471 people are dead. Many had been sheltering there, they say, believing they were safe from Israel's bombardment. Israel denies it is responsible. It blames a misfired rocket from inside Gaza. And today, while meeting Israel's prime minister, President Biden said this.
And based on what I've seen, it appears as though it was done by the other team, not you. But there's a lot of people out there not sure. So we've got to overcome a lot of things. And it also means encouraging life-saving capacity to help the Palestinians who are innocent, caught in the middle of this.
This is what the Al-Ahli Hospital, an Anglican-run hospital, looked like before the explosion. The medical facility is in the heart of Gaza City, not far from the largest hospital, Al-Shifa. Both are in northern Gaza, which Israel has ordered all civilians to leave before its ground invasion. There is no escape from Gaza, though. Among the thousands who have moved south are Canadian Suzanne Harb and her children. She sent us this audio message.
By sunset, we didn't know what's going to happen to us. Like every single night, I feel this is it. This is the last night we're going to live.
Days of promises to open the Rafah gate to allow foreign nationals out and aid in have still not been kept. Today, President Biden said Egypt's president has agreed to open the crossing to allow in some humanitarian aid, but that has yet to happen. The division and hatred in the region is ramping up by the day. We'll have more on that in just a moment, but we begin with Jeff Semple in Jerusalem and what we know about that hospital in Gaza. Jeff.
Donna, the question consuming this region, who was responsible for that hospital strike? The answer could carry consequences far beyond Gaza's borders.
The moment of impact. That explosion Tuesday night killed hundreds at this hospital, according to staff. It was packed with civilians receiving treatment and taking shelter from the relentless Israeli airstrikes.
Families who had sought refuge inside the hospital, thinking that it would be a safe haven. It's these very same families who are now either dead or critically wounded as a result of this attack.
Surrounded by children in body bags, a visibly shaken Dr. Ghassan Abu Sitta held a press conference describing the carnage and pointing the finger at Israel.
What happened today is a war crime, and if the Israelis get away with it again, then more war crimes will be committed and more hospitals will be targeted.
The sun came up hours later, revealing the awful aftermath. These satellite images show the area before and after the blast. The explosion sparked international outrage and condemnation of Israel. Then, Wednesday morning, the Israeli military held their own press conference.
The evidence, which we are sharing with you all, confirms that the explosion of the Al-Ahli al-Mahadani Hospital in Gaza was caused by an Islamic Jihad rocket that was misfired.
This military spokesperson says the rocket was actually fired at Israel from Gaza by a militant group aligned with Hamas. But the rocket malfunctioned and came crashing down into a parking lot near the hospital.
According to our intelligence, Hamas checked the reports, understood it was an Islamic Jihad rocket that had misfired, and decided to launch a global media campaign to hide what really happened.
The Israeli military also released this audio recording, which purports to show two Hamas operatives on the phone discussing the failed rocket. Global News can't verify the authenticity of the tape, but based on photographs from the scene, this United Nations war crimes investigator says the blast does not appear to have been caused by an Israeli airstrike.
I have investigated hundreds of airstrikes, and you just don't see what you would expect to see from an airstrike, particularly with the munitions that the Israelis use.
He says airstrikes typically create a crater of 3 to 10 meters. This blast left a smaller hole, likely from the impact of the fall.
Additionally, you see a lot of thermal damage, right? This was caused by heat. And most aerial bombs don't actually use heat to do the damage, right? They use blast and fragmentation. So I don't see things here consistent with an airstrike, so I think we can rule that out.
The U.S. president, on his visit to Israel, said America's preliminary intelligence suggested the same.
Based on the information we've seen to date, it appears the result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza.
But Palestinian and other Arab leaders aren't buying it. Hamas just released a statement listing past examples of Israel threatening Palestinian hospitals, killing civilians, and then lying to cover it up. Anger over that hospital strike has also upended Joe Biden's plans. His meeting in Amman with Arab leaders was canceled. Donna?
Jeff Semple in Jerusalem. Thank you, Jeff. The death of hundreds more civilians in Gaza has unleashed a wave of anger across the Arab world. People took to the streets in Iraq and Lebanon, in Jordan, Libya, and Tunisia. Despite Israel's denials, the belief Israel is responsible for that hospital hit is widespread. Israel is surrounded by Arab countries, Lebanon to the north, Egypt to the south, Syria and Jordan to the east. And Israel has long positioned itself as a defender of wider Western interests in the region. Crystal Goomansingh is looking at how relations with Israel and its neighbors have dimmed.
Hamas is not in charge of the West Bank, but that doesn't mean Palestinians here aren't caught up in the current conflict with Israel. Palestinian officials say more than 60 have died at the hands of Israeli forces since October 7th, and tensions are rising. Arab nations were called on by Hamas and Hezbollah to take to the streets Wednesday in solidarity with those in Gaza.
Shame on you! Shame on you! This needs to stop right now.
A deadly explosion at a hospital in Gaza City Tuesday that killed hundreds is being used as a rallying cry to unite people against Israel and its supporters. For many, it doesn't matter that Israel says it wasn't responsible for the attack on the hospital, pointing to the group Islamic Jihad. In Yemen, many pledge their souls and blood for the cause. This brutal extermination is being perpetrated in plain sight in front of the world. The call to protect humanity came from the head of the Houthi Media Commission. Houthi rebels are considered to be a part of Iran's axis of resistance, as is Hezbollah, which is both a militant and political power in Lebanon. Tear gas and water cannons were used to keep demonstrators in Beirut away from the U.S. Embassy. America's unequivocal support for Israel and its war on Hamas makes it a target for anger that's reaching a tipping point. If this battle continues, says this Hamas official, I can tell you that all scenarios are open, and what we have up our sleeves in our resistance is still not over. And what we have presented is just part of what we possess. A haunting warning considering the deadly attack Hamas launched October 7th on Israel. The resistance is gaining momentum, with people gathering in the streets from Iraq to Tunisia. The Organization for Islamic Cooperation is also getting involved. At the emergency meeting, it called on the international community to ensure all civilians are protected. Member nations are also talking about sanctioning Israel, as well as floating the idea of hiring Islamic lawyers to investigate possible war crimes by Israel. Donna?
Crystal Goomansingh in Jerusalem. Thanks, Crystal. The American President Joe Biden has always believed in the power of his personal diplomacy. That's why he went to Israel, and he spent a long time talking with Israel's prime minister. Biden faces a delicate balancing act. He did not call for a ceasefire and was unequivocal in his support for Israel, though he is urging restraint. Jackson Proskow on what influence Biden might have.
It was a trip layered with complexity and risk as the American president embraced a nation at war.
I come to Israel with a single message. You're not alone.
Walking a diplomatic tightrope, Joe Biden's visit was remarkable not only for its timing, but also its message.
When the boots on the ground belong to the commander-in-chief, you're forever identified with that location. Biden now owns the war in Israel.
Biden hopes to stop the situation from spiraling into a wider regional conflict, while urging Israel to exercise restraint in its response to Hamas.
After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes.
The message was carefully crafted to allow the U.S. to extract concessions.
He will have a tremendous amount of leeway and leverage to speak to the Israelis in a manner that says, I need you to do this, get more diplomatic, do more on humanitarian aid.
Though American military support is fully behind Israel, Biden announced $100 million in humanitarian aid to Gaza and the West Bank, claiming to have secured agreement from Israel to allow its delivery.
If you have an opportunity to alleviate the pain, you should do it, period. And if you don't, you're going to lose credibility worldwide. And I think everyone understands that.
Yet the U.S. cannot escape the simmering anger across the Middle East. After the deadly explosion at a Gaza hospital, Jordan canceled a planned summit between Biden and leaders from Egypt and the Palestinian Authority, though the White House is still talking to Arab partners behind the scenes.
If Biden can fill that vacuum with true leadership, I think we do have an opportunity to turn this terrible war into a pathway to peace.
Peace, in Biden's view, would be a two-state solution. That seems all but impossible in this moment, as Israel prepares its offensive with the backing of its most powerful ally. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
It is too early to say with absolute certainty who was responsible for the explosion at that Gaza hospital. That will take time, yet many have already made up their minds. With misinformation and disinformation online, the truth can be distorted, and that can be dangerous. Redmond Shannon looks at the growth of open source intelligence and why it could be important in this case.
There is no structural damage to the building.
All of the apparent evidence presented by the Israeli Defense Forces pointed to a rocket that was launched from inside Gaza, hitting Al-Ahli Hospital. But Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari knows some people just won't believe him.
The information war is a hard war. It's a hard enemy.
Israel is fighting against Hamas claims it is to blame and against the days of its airstrikes that the Gazan Health Ministry says have killed more than 3,000 people. Among the misery of war, there is propaganda and emotion, particularly online.
If you feel angry or if you feel really passionate about what you're seeing, that should be a sign for you to sort of slow down, calm down, because when you're passionate about something, the logical part of your brain tends to take a back seat.
Giancarlo Fiorella works for Bellingcat. It is one of the pioneers of independent open source intelligence, or OSINT. Bellingcat investigates disputed events using verifiable, publicly available data, from business registries to flight data to satellite images.
That's something that we take a lot of pride in. That is our ability as an organization to say, look, here's what we have discovered. But not just that, here's every single step that we took to making these discoveries.
Bellingcat raises funds from non-government grants, donations and training courses. It is currently working through the evidence of the Gaza hospital case, as are a growing number of OSINT units at large news outlets, including the BBC and New York Times.
you can get almost as good a picture from OSINT if you know what you're doing and you can put that level of analysis in and you can approach it with no bias whatsoever as you can from secret sources.
The truth about what happened at Al-Ahli Hospital could be vital to the future of this conflict. Arguably more important will be what the people of the Middle East believe to be the truth. The world of transparent public data may help bring those two things closer together. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
The war in Ukraine has slipped from the headlines, but is still raging on. And today, at least 7 people were killed in Russian attacks that also damaged the power grid in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. In Zaporizhia, 4 people died in a morning missile strike on a 5-story apartment building. That attack left a gaping hole. Windows were blown out, the entrance destroyed. A new era in Manitoba politics officially begins. Coming up, why the new Premier, Wab Kinew, isn't the only one making history. Manitoba made history today. Wab Kinew was sworn in as the first First Nations Premier of a Canadian province.
My fellow Manitobans, today is a new day in our province.
Kinew took his oath of office wearing a ceremonial Anishinaabe headdress. He led his new Democratic Party to victory in the provincial election earlier this month. He says his diverse team is a reflection of the province.
Today, Manitoba now has a Jewish lieutenant governor, an Anishinaabe premier, a gender-balanced cabinet, and a government MLA team that represents many walks of life from so many regions of this great province.
Kinew's 15-member cabinet includes 2 First Nations women, another Manitoba first. Tense times ahead, how the Middle East crisis is threatening an Israel-Saudi diplomatic deal. The attack by Hamas on Israel has been described as the worst atrocity since the Holocaust. In the 12 days since then, Israel's siege on Gaza has been relentless, and Israel's neighbors are watching. The U.S. has been trying to normalize relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, 2 historic foes, but this escalating violence is derailing those plans, as Turia Isri reports.
U.S. President Joe Biden visited the Middle East, where a major foreign policy goal of his is at risk. Biden's push to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia.
It was generally accepted it was going to be a matter of time, not a case of if, but when. And then, of course, everything changed.
After the October 7th attack by Hamas militants on Israel, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken traveled to Riyadh and met with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
Very productive.
In an interview with 60 Minutes, Biden was also optimistic.
Is the effort to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia now dead?
No.
But the Reuters news agency is reporting the talks are in jeopardy.
It is incredibly difficult and perhaps unwise to normalize relations against a backdrop of an Arab-Israeli war. And this is how Saudi views this.
Saudi public opinion appears against a rapprochement. A potential deal could fuel extremist elements within the kingdom and contribute to a belief among many Palestinians they're being used as a political football.
The Arab states have abandoned Palestinians. The very idea of a 2-state solution is a non-starter at the moment.
A long list of countries in the Arab world have normalized relations with Israel, starting with Egypt and Jordan. More followed suit in 2020 with the signing of the Abraham Accords. Saudi Arabia remains one of the last holdouts. The U.S. says a rapprochement between the Saudis and Israelis will increase regional stability. In exchange, the Saudis want more advanced U.S. weapons. Saudi Arabia and Israel also share a common rival in Iran.
They have always said, use this logic of the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
The Saudis maintain any deal with the Israelis must include concessions to the Palestinians. But with Israel declaring war on Hamas, that prospect appears unlikely. And right now, so does an agreement. Turia Isri, Global News, Ottawa.
Still no way out. Next, the Canadians losing hope of getting out of Gaza. For days now, foreign nationals, including Canadians who are trapped in Gaza, have been told they will get out, that the Rafah gate into Egypt will open. That has yet to happen. And those who heeded Israel's warning to move south towards that gate are losing hope. Among the Canadians trapped in Gaza for 12 days is Asia Mahkour and her 2 young children. She says they have moved multiple times trying to find a safe place. Today, when we asked her to update us on her situation, all she sent was this text: "I can't, because I am out of words, out of hope." Susan Harb is a Palestinian-Canadian teacher from Alberta who moved to Gaza last year with her children and husband. She was able to send us these voice messages.
Like every single night, I feel this is it. This is the last night we're gonna live. I count my kids, cuddle up with them, and bring them tight closer to me to make sure if something happened, we're gonna be all in the same place. There's nowhere safe. Every single place is a target. And the supplies are already running out. We can't find any flour in the supermarkets. We barely can find a clean water because we had to walk around the whole area to find some. We're running, there's no meat, there's no chicken, there's no fridge that can contain any of those.
Now, she says all she wants is to go back to Canada.
I moved so thinking that I want my kids to be around the family, you know, the roots. We had an amazing life. We had a great house. We had a great family. The kids were doing amazing. And now it's just a nightmare. All what I'm thinking, I want to go back. I want to go back to my home. I want to go back.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. We leave you tonight with vigils being held around the world for all the civilians killed in this conflict. Thanks for watching.